is Pop Culture Yearbook, and on this show, we pick pieces of pop culture that were important to us in a given year. We then discuss memories and dig into those movies, albums, shows, and more. I'm Brad.
He did it. I just want to comment that he did it. He made it.
Nice job.
Thank you.
I'm Pete.
And I'm Giff.
And who else is with us?
Oh no, not him. Not who. I hope it's not.
I'm Dave.
God damn it!
Yay! It's been a while.
God,
Looking back, Dave played a couple games with us, but like it's been almost a year since like a full out good episode. So this is good.
Yeah.
And we're gonna shoot the wad all month with him. So
Whoa.
Whoa!
Oh wow!
Hello.
Easy done.
When was the Foo Fighters episode?
it was like in May, I think. So
Was it that long ago?
yeah.
Oh wow!
My God. It was right after. Well, yeah. Taylor Hawkins died in March, right?
So a little business, Pete. You have something to do.
Oh, I would like to apologize to all of our listeners who listened to the last episode. A very important thing that I neglected to do, that we do at the end of every month, is that I forgot to close the yearbook. So let's do it right now. Let's close the yearbook on
the year.
What year was it? Oh, on the year 2000.
There you
That's
go.
what it was. Yes.
That's good that we
There it
closed
is.
the yearbook, because if we're going to be shooting WAD all month, we don't want to get anything on the pages of the yearbook.
Oh boy.
Has this podcast changed or something? I feel a little comfortable on this thing.
No.
No, we
no.
always feel uncomfortable.
All right.
That's how it's always been.
Now this month is big, guys. So
Yes.
tonight, this episode we are recording is episode number what?
99.
99.
Is that a
And
niner
so
in there?
You were calling from a walkie-talkie.
Mhm.
Next week, we are going to be putting out our 100th episode. Believe it or not, we've actually been at it for that long and kept with it. And so we decided that we have a special thing we want to talk about for that episode. And we have a special guy we want to have with us.
Yes, he is special.
And that is Dave. So Dave, as many would know, hopefully who listen, is a big part of the show, was there from the beginning, and he's been on many great episodes, and he's going to be with us all month. In fact, other than next month's, which we all kind of agreed on, not next month's, next week's, which we all kind of agreed on, he has picked all the content for us to talk about this month. So next week, should we say what we're going to talk about next week?
No.
Why not?
God, no.
Okay.
Why not?
Do not. No.
I
They
think
have
all
to tune in
right.
and figure out. It's going to be a cliffhanger.
They figure it out as soon as they
They're
click
going
on it anyway when it comes
Yeah.
out.
I
so-
don't care.
we've been saving one of our all-time favorite movies, which fits us very well for that special episode.
Yes.
And here's a clue then, Pete. That movie is from 1986. And so some of our other content is coming from 1986 as well, although we are not officially doing 1986 because we also have an outlier from that as well.
Mhm.
So is that okay? Do you want to say it, or
Well,
is that good?
And Brad, could I say, when I was talking with you about this, I was saying if you guys wanted to call it Studio 666 plus 6.
Yeah. This was
'cause
back
it's
when
the Foo
it's Fighters movie was out
386.
too, when it got originated.
Right. It was 386 and 196.
And that
And
96 is going to be a
it's a-
doozy.
It's a dream lineup for me.
That's
Mhm.
great.
In
So,
the words
Dave.
of Tommy Boy, pretty little maids all in a row.
So, Dave, we're starting it tonight with what might be described by you as your favorite movie of all time. What better way to start?
Mhm.
Why don't you tell us what it is and why?
Go for
Yeah,
it.
so I'll just go into a little bit of this. So the movie is Big Trouble in Little China. And going into this, I asked you guys, I said, I don't want to know whether or not you've ever seen it. I knew Brad had never seen it. But then I also didn't want to know what you think. And this kind of goes into the top 5 that I asked everybody to put together, which is, so I'm just going to say right now, this is my favorite movie of all time. I know that there are a lot of ridiculous things in it that we will talk about and probably laugh about. And just like in, so I just watched Good Will Hunting with my kids, and in there, Robin Williams talks about how his wife was like imperfectly perfect. to
Hey,
me,
we've
that's,
used that phrase on here before.
Yes, we have.
yeah.
He's a fan. He
So-
knows.
So that's the thing, is like this movie to me, like there are going to be things that I'll shake my head and kind of go, yeah, I know it's ridiculous. I don't care.
Right.
This movie is perfect to me.
And you don't need
So-
to.
Yeah. So when I think about one of the things I think is really interesting about this movie is I have a very distinct memory of this movie before I even saw it. And that
Okay.
is, so I know specifically where I saw this and when, and it was after this was in the theaters. So this came out on 4th of July weekend of 1986.
Mhm.
And I went to, so the weekend that this came out, I went to a movie with my best friend from from elementary school. His name was Rob Grammer. And Rob and I went to Karate Kid Part 2,
Ah,
which I also thought was awesome. We went to the
I'm
movie
a
that
fan.
night. Yeah, we went to the movie that night. It was super fun. I was super stoked to see, Karate Kid 2. Love that the opening scene had Kreese beating the crap out of Johnny, and then Miyagi comes over, represents. But that
Mhm.
night we get back out afterwards, and Rob had a brother. His name was Brian, who was my older sister Jenny's age. So they're 4 years older. Brian went with a friend, and they went and saw this. And then we went to Karate Kid 2. So we get back in the car. Rob and I are feeling good. But the whole drive home, and Rob lived in Sabin, which was like the next town over. It was a smaller town, but the kids in Sabin would get bussed into Moorhead. So it was a long ride out to Sabin. And the whole time I'm hearing Brian and his friend talking about this bonkers movie that they saw. And the two things that really stand out is they were talking about, they couldn't believe that these guys were like having a sword fight in the air. And then they said, and then when like the guy tried to chop a bottle with a machete, and the whole time I'm listening to them, and all they kept saying over and over, I can't even describe what I just saw. And all I
True
could think
statement.
was like, well, yeah. And I kept thinking like, what in the hell did they see? Right. And I knew the name of the movie. We'll get into, like, the movie was a total flop at the box office. So I don't think it was, and my guess is it probably wasn't in theaters long. I never went back and saw it in the theaters, even though the whole ride home, I kept thinking, what is this movie that they're talking about? So I'm guessing it was the next summer, because it was so I still remember the kid's name. It was a kid who lived by me. His name was Don Larson. Don's birthday
pitcher?
party.
Pitched a perfect game.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, he's pretty athletic. So he Don Larson, his birthday party, he had a sleepover. He lived by a park that was near my house. And it had to have been either spring or summer, because I walked there, and I went to the sleepover. We watched the movie totally delivered for me. Now, so all the movies we're going to talk about this month, I will say I watch them differently now as an adult than I did as a kid. So I'll kind of explain that. But I watched the movie. I could not believe what I just saw. And I remember walking home from his house. I had to take this like shortcut. There was like a little flower shop by my house, and like when you would go walk through there, like by where their greenhouse was and everything, it was kind of like this secluded little area. And I remember like hiding up against the walls of the greenhouse and pretending I was, holding a gun and whatever. Like, and like, it just was like, I was so amped on like the idea of like an action movie that I was pretending to be like Jack Burton all the walk home. And so anyway, a couple of things of why it appealed to me back when I was a kid. So we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the Breakfast Club. So I'm like 10, 11
Mhm.
years old at this point. And at this point, I'm watching all these movies so John Bender, Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop, Chris Knight in Real Genius, and Jack Burton. They're all these guys who are like, they're loudmouths, right? They are holding court constantly. They're full of bravado. And I was like eating that up and trying to be that kid when I was that age. I'm sure I was annoying as hell. But
Was?
When are you growing out of that?
yeah.
Oh boy.
I know. So anyway, so I'll get into a little bit about the movie and then we can talk about the movie. So again, it was released in July 4th, 1986.
Hey, that's Gifford's birthday.
Well, and so one thing I really liked about the first three that we'll talk about was watching the box office by week. So this is such a time. I loved what our movie going experiences was when we were kids. So all these movies. So first of all, it opened at number 12. A couple of the new movies it opened behind, just it pisses me off to even hear. It opened behind Psycho 3. Give me a break.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but the top 7 that week were all movies that had already been out, including Karate Kid 2 was number 1, Back to School, Top Gun, Ferris Bueller. There were a lot of good movies out, but even back then, it opened at 2.7 million. It only made 11.1. So it was a pretty quick burn. And actually, when I read so Entertainment Weekly in 2016 released this like history of the movie, and Kurt Russell talked about like he hadn't had a big hit at that point in his career, and all these people like in all the press junkets were like, how does it feel to be in, because they thought this was going to be like the next Indiana Jones. And which I have to say, when I watch it, I go, they nailed like the whole comedy action thing, in my opinion. They nailed that so well, way more than any other movie I can think of. And Kurt Russell talked about how he had to sit there and humbly go, yeah, well, you never know. But in his mind, he's thinking, yeah, I hit the jackpot here. Mm-hmm. And then it came out and no one went. And, John Carpenter, the director, he talks about how he thinks that it was marketed poorly, which, whatever. I do think it's just kind of, I mean, I think there's things that where you could say, yeah, it's kind of a weird movie and maybe different from its time. But one of the things was when they were making it, it was originally supposed to be set in the 1890s or something like that. And it was going to be a Western where Jack Burton comes in on a horse to deliver meat to Chinese men making the transatlantic railroad.
Okay.
And when I hear what this movie was going to be, I'm like, oh my God, thank God it didn't become that. So John Carpenter originally wanted to have Clint Eastwood play Jack Burton, which I'm like, oh my God, terrible.
Yeah.
They rushed into, so there was another writer who came in and said, no, we got to make it modern day. And actually that is when John Carpenter came on. He was never on when it was going to be an old Western.
The 80s is when Clint Eastwood was kind of in his comedy phase though, right?
Well, so
Every Which Way But Loose.
I've listened to a couple of podcasts that talk about that. The one that they always reference is Pink Cadillac.
Oh yeah,
which
that's
is
another
not
one.
a movie I've ever seen. But
I haven't
Clint
either,
Eastwood has never been like a humor guy.
No, you wouldn't think so. But he kind of had that face there.
Even with
unless you're Greg Gutfeld, but I digress. So the one thing they were doing, they were rushing out to get out theatrically before The Golden Child. Because Paramount,
I saw that.
I remember that movie. Yeah.
That movie sucked.
I want the knife.
That's the only part
I want the knife. Please. So here's the thing. I have a total soft spot for The Golden Child as well.
I do too.
I love Eddie Murphy so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were Eddie Murphy was on fire. There was this whole thing where he was going to be involved in an Asian culture related movie. And so they were rushing. The crazy thing is there is tons of cast overlap between Big Trouble and Golden Child. So the three biggest ones. So the guy who plays Egg Shen, his name is Victor Wong. He plays the dad. He's the I want the knife. He's the guy that's calling the shots down there.
Yep.
James Hong, which I mean, what do you guys all? He's Lil Pan. What do you guys all know James Hong from?
Cartwright.
I say Cartwright.
She said
you don't come.
Right. Well, you know him from everything.
Cartwright.
Seinfeld, by the way, in case anybody out there is,
The
clueless to it.
restaurant. Yes.
Yeah. He was also, I think he might have been in Wayne's World 2 as well.
Yes. The Chinese restaurant episode with, yes, he was Tia Carrere's dad there. So that's Lo Pan. And then the third one is, and this guy, like, I watch this movie now and I go, if I would have been a female in 1986, I think I would have come of age watching this movie with this guy. Rain of the Three Storms, the one with the really long hair.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Kwong was Tommy Tong in The Golden Child. And that dude, he's something else.
I don't remember who that is.
Okay.
So of the three storms, he's the one that flies around. He's got the long.
You say Three Storms. I don't even know what that means.
The three guys
this movie
that are
was so
wearing the big
confusing.
hats.
The three
What
guys
is
that had the big,
wrong
like,
with you, Brad?
sombreros.
Well,
Oh
first of
my
all, you guys
God.
watched it more recently because I get my homework done and then I have to sit around and wait. So forget things.
That's why I specifically don't watch things until about a couple days before, so everything's fresh
Right.
I don't
in
like to
the
be
old-
rushed in case
in
it
the
doesn't
old
work.
noggin.
Oh my God. Well, so here's the thing. And part of why I have the list that I have at the end, the whole, what do you love, but you're hesitant to recommend to anyone else.
Mhm.
So I will say I've gone through most of my life where if I tell people that this is one of my favorite movies, they look at me like I'm an alien.
Well,
You're
and
an
I heard
indication.
you. I lived with Dave in college for a year, and I heard about this movie a million times. And you'd think I would have watched it maybe at some point, or we would have even watched it together, but we never did. And I just heard about it, and I'm like, really? That's your favorite movie, huh?
Did I talk about it a lot back then? Because here's the thing.
Yes, that's how it goes way back.
Well, see, so here's the thing. I don't push to watch this with other people because I am consistently disappointed in their reaction. Because I love it. And like, I get it. I get it if you watch this and you go like, huh, weird. But like to me, this is, I go, you kidding me, man? This is awesome. So that's kind of so anyway, a couple last things. So one thing I will say, and again, this relates to another conversation. So when we talked in 91 about Boys in the Hood, I talked about how Boys in the Hood was like this whole different world that I couldn't relate to. And that was part of the appeal. That's part of the appeal here. And I will say that I do think this movie ages well in the sense that, it's probably one of the only like studio movies you can look back at in the 80s to say the majority of the cast was Asian and it wasn't played for like stereotypical jokes and things like
Long
that.
Duck Dong.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I know you guys talked about 16 Candles and that's the thing. It's not that there are things in here I'll bring up where I go like, yeah, I could, and actually when they were making this movie, it got like, there were people who protested at the filming of it for that very reason, is that like, Kurt Russell is a white savior and all this. But what I love about this movie now, and I definitely watch it differently now versus when I was a kid, is that John Carpenter, and he said this in that oral history of, he basically said, when I read the script, I realized that Jack Burton is not the hero. Wang is the hero.
Yeah. Oh,
and
sure.
Jack is kind of the buffoon, and they play it that way. Which I think I didn't see it that way as a kid. I totally see it that way now, and I go, that's what makes this movie great. You're seeing it through Jack Burton, but he's a total blowhard, dipshit. And by the way, though, what I do love is, even though he doesn't have like he's not notching wins throughout the movie, he's not a coward. And that's part of what I love about it too. So I just think it strikes this awesome balance in that way. So two last things before we get into the movie. Lo One is this was going to be rumored to be remade with The Rock back in 2016.
Okay.
And
my.
I was like, please don't do that. And part of it is that I don't think The Rock and Jumanji changed it a little bit. And actually I've heard now that they were thinking about like doing almost like a Jumanji style reboot, which I go, okay, I loved that so much that maybe they would do it right. But to me, that's the thing is like The Rock being Jack Burton wouldn't, I don't think he would be comfortable. Let's put it this way. He's not going to start a fight scene where he shoots the ceiling and he gets knocked out so that everyone else gets in the fight.
Right.
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 And so there's that part of it. I'm glad that it hasn't been remade. I haven't really been looking for more in this universe. And that kind of goes into, so when we talked about The Room, this movie and The Room are the two movies that I feel like have connected me to the majority of the movie podcasts I listen to. So
Okay.
normally if I'm kind of looking for something new to listen to, I'll type in either one of these movie titles to pull something up. So I'm just going to call out a couple of podcasts that I found because of this movie. Brad, I know you listen to Hey, Do You Remember? And they don't make new episodes now. But the whole reason I found that podcast was because I searched this movie. And this movie was the first one on that podcast I listened to. And then I've subsequently went back and listened to the majority of their episodes, and it's a great podcast. For years, I was hoping How Did This Get Made would do this. And they have not, but there's a podcast called Blank Check where the guys talk through like a certain director. They'll go through his whole catalog. Blank Check did this, and they had on Jason Mantzoukas and Paul Scheer from How Did This Get Made? And it was like, first of all, they talked about this movie for almost 3 hours. It might be 3 of the best hours of my life.
Oh boy.
And then the last one is just there's another podcast I found called Junk Food Cinema, and that was another one. They do a lot of like cult films like this, and that's the thing. So normally when I tell people I like this movie, they kind of look at me weird. What I've realized over time is that this is an absolute cult movie, and I just don't know a lot of other cult members. That's
Sure.
all.
Mhm.
So
Sure.
So with that, why don't we go around? I'd like to hear, had you ever seen this? What did you think?
I can go first on that. I will say I had never seen this movie before. The first probably half hour, 45 minutes, I thought it was great. I thought it was setting up really well. And I enjoyed the storyline. I liked the characters and kind of what was going on, kind of a little mystery going on. Then the second half of the movie for me is when it just totally went off the rails. Right.
Was it when Chinese Sasquatch showed up?
That was part of it, and I
Oh,
didn't
I
get
guess
what was
sewer
going
monster?
on there with that little monster, and then you had that floating head kind of thing.
I love the
and
floating
they just
eyeball.
kept throwing. Yeah, that's what it was. They kept throwing different things at you without any real explanation. I thought
Sure.
it was setting up well, though. I like the like how you're introduced to the characters and like with the gambling that they were doing to win each other's money, and how that was setting up. And then you had the girl that was being kidnapped or whatever. The parking lot was like really kind of or the parking ramp that they were in was kind of suspenseful, and I thought it was building up. But then once they got inside that temple or whatever it was, and all, I was like, oh my God, what the hell is this? And it just, and it was one thing after another, and then you ran into that really old guy. That was a very uncomfortable scene. The old guy that was in a wheelchair,
Little old
with a
basket
wheelchair.
case on wheels.
Yeah.
6,000 years old or something like that.
Mhm.
And it just seemed really, really fakey. I mean, it was probably good in 1986, but it seemed kind of fakey to me. And it was like the movie was just kept trying to outdo itself, and it was just I I don't know, but it was good. It was enjoyable. It was fun, and it did wrap up pretty well. But that was just kind of my opinion on it.
I called that monster thing a Chewbumble because he looked like Chewbacca and the Bumble from Rudolph.
Ah,
Oh,
I see.
I will tell you guys, as much as I think
it's like a perfect combination of those two things.
As much as I think this movie is imperfectly perfect, Chinese Sasquatch is not. And I, what is that? There is actually a name for it. I want to say it's the beast, the Chinese beast, or something like that. But that is one of the few things in the movie I don't love.
Okay.
It just kind of came out of nowhere. It wasn't like any building up for it or anything. It's just like they had other things going on. All of a sudden, whoa, what the hell is this thing?
Yeah, and then that is one of those moments. I mean, you know, they obviously there's got to be something where Gracie gets kept behind. But yeah, it's not a moment in the movie I love. It obviously was there to kind of tie to the end that's back on the truck when Jack leaves. You know,
Yeah,
sure. But and actually, before we move on, that is one thing. So there is a comic book that was made off of as a sequel, and it starts with that beast coming out. I read this in a comic book store out in California when I was out, you know, a couple of years ago for Christmas. There's this awesome comic book store by my in-laws' house. And one thing I will say, and this kind of goes to the whole John Carpenter thing of knowing that Jack Burton wasn't necessarily the hero. So they talk about all the Chinese hells.
Mm-hmm.
So in the comic book, when Lo Pan shows up, he is in the hell where people are killed by idiots. So it's the idea that Jack Burton's an idiot. And so now he's being tortured for being being killed by a moron. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Cool.
Right.
I had never seen this, Dave.
And I knew you hadn't.
Always so curious. Well, actually, I guess you don't remember it, but you talked about it so much that I thought about watching it many, many times and just never did. So I was kind of excited to finally have an excuse where I had to watch it. And I do love Kurt Russell. Like there's so many movies he made that I love.
Yeah.
But I tell you, I was confused right off the bat. I felt like there just was any kind of character development. I didn't understand the relationship between him and Wang. And I didn't get why Jack had to be involved and why he had to go with. And it was like, I was asking myself, like, is he supposed to be some kind of like a superhero or something? And then all of a sudden you had these two gangs just fighting and killing each other off. Like, how often do they do this? If they kill each other that much, how do they survive? But then I realized this is like fantasy stuff. And I was lost.
It's like the Crips and the Bloods, man.
So kind of like opposite of Pete, I was lost for the first half. And then, once they got into it, like you kind of see the main thing. So anyway, and Kim Cattrall, I felt like her acting in this movie is just not good. So,
oh God, it was terrible.
I love her.
There were several lines where she was just like, I had that written down, just how terrible of an actress.
So I mean, it was still.
I like doing other stuff.
It was fun to watch on behalf of you. It was interesting. I'm glad I got to see it finally. But I mean, I guess I don't think I'll probably ever watch it again. So.
Sure. Well, the biggest thing that I loved about this movie is that Dave loves it.
Yes, me too.
So along with Brad, I remember driving home from work a couple nights ago, and I was excited because a lot of the stuff we cover on this podcast are old favorites that we attach nostalgia to. It's not very often that we get to watch something we've never seen before. So very excited to get into that and to watch the movie. Go ahead, Brad.
If I can just interject too. So we love it because Dave loves it. Mm-hmm. But like, as I've started to listen to more and more podcasts, I've seen this movie pop up in a lot of other ones too, which made me more intrigued by it. This isn't just Dave. Like there's, it's the cult and there's the group that loves it. And so that made me interested as well.
Sure. So, excuse me. So I can understand like how you got so emotionally attached to this, because you saw it when you were 11.
Yeah,
like
right.
how
That
many
makes a
things
difference.
have I seen? You brought up The Golden Child. I think of The Golden Child with very good feelings. It's, not a great movie, but there were so many funny things. Eddie Murphy was the man. But
every time that Pepsi can starts dancing, you're like, yes.
yeah, you're like, yeah, I was like, it's kind of nuts. But I mean, it's not, the writing's a little tough. The acting in a lot of cases is pretty tough. I hate to say it, but I feel like this movie may be the ground on which the raspberry bush was planted, for which the raspberries were produced for subsequent Razzie recipients.
I did not say
Wow.
that. I want that
Wow.
noted.
Holy
It's a tough watch, but that's what makes it a cult classic. There's a group that really loves it. And again, Kurt Russell, I love Kurt Russell. He's outstanding.
Well, and did you not find him entertaining in this movie?
Yes. Oh, and there's
there's
things in it that are entertaining. And I wrote down, like, for example, like in the beginning when they're in the alleyway and the gangs are, coming through the alleyway to begin this big battle. Like right off the bat, I thought Anchorman. Like, the crews are coming together for the big fight,
These good guys, these Sing-Dings, Chang Sings, do they have enemies? Yeah, Wing Kongs, who wear red turbans. Holy shit, Jack.
Right.
Like here's the thing, is that I do think that with a couple of small exceptions, I think this movie is paced so well. I think it goes.
There's long. That's good.
There's only one time where I think it drags a little bit, and it's when they're making sure. And to me, this is so. Even as a kid, the main plot hole where I was like, "What?" was the whole. They need to find a girl with green eyes, and she doesn't have to be Chinese.
That's what I didn't get. I thought, because now all of a sudden Kim Cattrall has green eyes, and they're like, "Oh, she'll work too." And I was like,
because they made a big deal.
Right.
They made a big deal earlier about a Chinese girl with green eyes, right? Yeah. They pointed that out, and then it didn't have to be later.
But here's what it is, and given that I've watched this 356 odd times. 4 times in the twice this year, four times in the last month. So the point is that it's a girl with green eyes who can tame the burning blade and has dragon green eyes. So like the idea, so at the one point where little old basket case on wheels is talking to Jack. So when little old basket case on wheels is talking to Jack, and Jack's like, "Oh, come on, I'm supposed to buy this shit 2,000 years and you can't find a girl who works, Dave? Come on, you're doing something wrong." That's where it's the whole idea of that they would have to have green eyes, but they would also have to have like this level of courage or bravery where they can tame the burning blade. That whole scene where they're checking that that
makes total
one
sense.
Place where I think it drags. And so I like to think there's like 18 women who like exploded when they grabbed that thing.
Sure.
And they didn't float up. They just like exploded like thunder exploded in that.
Dave likes to think about 18 women exploding.
I love to think about
in
that.
A love
back
test.
To back to Kurt Russell. I do find him entertaining, but in this movie, I felt like it was almost like he was over the top, like playing the inflated version of him where he plays that role, right? But then like took it to another level, which
he's got a John Wayne type accent during this movie as well.
Yeah.
So
it started out. It seemed like it came in and out a little bit. That accent.
That's the thing, though. So in this movie, and I'm not my dad wasn't a John Wayne guy. I didn't grow up watching John Wayne movies, but every time you read anything about this movie, that's what he was impersonating. Just like when he had worked with John Carpenter on a couple other movies. He had done an Elvis biopic, which a lot of people haven't seen, but he had been in Escape from New York as Snake Plissken. In there, he's imitating Clint Eastwood. He was in The Thing, where he's a little different. This is like John Carpenter is a director who is absolutely loved because I love this movie, I've gone back to see, like, even in the last year, I watched The Thing again, just as a second opinion, because I liked it. I didn't think it was a masterpiece like a lot of people did. I also watched They Live, which is a movie that he did with Roddy Piper. I like his other movies, but I don't
Roddy Piper.
Roddy Piper.
Pete.
That's where he did the whole we've come here to kick ass and chew bubble gum.
We're all out of bubble gum.
And that
Love
movie
that line.
that movie is interesting. It's not entertaining in the way that I think this is entertaining. And I just think him and Kurt Russell were just going for it. And it was like, for me, it just hit in all the right ways.
Absolutely.
So getting into a little bit of the flow of the movie. So what you guys are talking about, and that's the thing is, and this is another thing that I just appreciate on the back end in general, after having worked for a movie. So I can't stand how commercialized everything is now. Like and it comes from, I worked for a while, like I bought movies for a while for a retailer, and then I worked for a movie studio, and I cannot stand how everything has to get marketed to the nth degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole idea of, I'm always fascinated by how movies came to be and studio notes. So this opening scene, so that's one thing, Brad, where you're talking about, like, I could, I'm trying to follow it. That whole opening scene only exists where Egg is getting interviewed by a lawyer, and it's like, what the fuck is this? There's somebody in the background, like a stenographer. Yep. taking notes. Like, what is he getting deposed? What is going on? Well, it makes no sense. That was because of a studio note, because they wanted Jack Burton to be like the next Indiana Jones, and it was, you have to have this scene at the beginning where Egg Shen is talking about how Jack is this hero who saved them. So the interesting thing with
like
John
a superhero.
Well, and so because you even asked that, right? And that's the point, is that the movie does not play that way, except that some of the characters are all very like, I think it's funny when they're, after the whole fight, they're in the restaurant, and Eddie the maitre d' shows up, and he's like, Jack Burton, oh, the guy you always tell me about, Wang, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a little bit of that whole, I thought he'd be taller kind of thing with it, but that whole scene only exists because the studio wanted it, and John Carpenter was like, he's not the hero of the movie. So I love the way that they film that. And then here's the thing, and again, I'm not joking when I say I watched it 4 times in the last couple weeks.
See, that's wonderful.
And I had so much fun doing it. I watched it with my kids. I watched it one time while I was exercising. I took notes one time. Next week's movie I've watched 3 times so far. and that's the thing is I had so much fun doing that. And every time that first scene ends and the music kicks in and you see the Pork Chop Express coming over that run, and then it comes and it kicks up the water, the graphics come up, I get freaking goosebumps every freaking time.
You've watched next week's movie 3 times already?
I did.
Well, that makes me so happy.
Yeah. I could use a word that would give it away, but I won't.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Well, a certain number of
because
times.
It would fit in perfectly. It would fit in perfectly.
Yep.
Well, not even that. A word that describes multiple.
Yeah.
So anyway, so every time that scene happens, it's just, so one of the funniest descriptions I ever heard, and it was on the Hey Do You Remember podcast, but so I know I ate this up as a kid. The guy on there said, so then we cut to Jack Burton in his truck doing basically an early version of Twitter over the CD.
He's podcasting.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, so it makes no sense that he's just like, hey, so I did write these down in case we were going to go. So this is Jack Burton in the Pork Chop Express, and I'm talking to whoever's listening out there. It's like I told my last wife, honey, I never drive faster than I can see. Besides, it's all in the reflexes. And then The second one is the one that cracks me up because he like laughs to himself at the end and he slams the CB down, but he goes, "You just listen to the old Pork Chop Express take his advice on a dark and stormy night when some wild-eyed 8-foot-tall maniac grabs you by the neck and taps the back of your favorite head against the barroom wall. And he looks at you crooked in the eye and asks you if you've paid your dues. You just stare that big sucker back in the eye. And you remember what old Jack Burton says at a time like that. Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir. The check is in the mail." And it's just like that is,
ladies
honestly,
and gentlemen, that
you
was
guys
Kurt
know
Russell.
me. You know me well enough now where like that kind of stuff, if I were to watch that for the first time now, I'd be like, "Oh, brother." But as an 11-year-old, I was like,
Yes.
"Oh my God."
Yeah.
I might figure out how to like I might come of age right now. So it was just like, it was heaven for me.
This goes back to our European vacation episode where you had a very different first viewing and viewpoint of it from us. And we ripped on you, and I'll continue to rip on you. I will not rip on you for loving this movie. This is wonderful that you love this movie. I can see why somebody would get into it, even if I don't.
Sure.
So you're wrong about European Vacation, but this one, you are wrong.
By the way, I don't think I am.
Yeah. Well, and that's the beauty of it. You don't have to apologize for what you like and what grabs you. I
you
mean,
just have to apologize for who you are.
I'll just say,
you saw this movie.
It's the best Rusty, baby.
I watched it for the first time 2 weeks ago. I'm 47 years old. It's had all this buildup. I didn't get it. You saw it as an 11-year-old. It's a different situation.
Right, right.
Even if I watched it in college when you talked it up, I was probably already like beyond the point where, I would have thought I would have been too cool for it.
Here's the thing. If we would have all gotten weird one night, got a little loaded up, and then
let's just get weird. You ever want to get
let's
weird?
Just get weird.
So
like it
I will say this. Different. I went with my dad when he would drive truck, mostly just day trips, not over the road long haul truckers like Jack is. But when you're in the truck, there'll just be a guy who comes on the CB, and that guy will talk for a while. You'll pick up, and Dad would grab the CB and talk back, and you'd talk to the guy for as long as he was in range, and then he was gone, and then the next guy, so that stuff does. I mean, there is, that
kind of like
talk
that,
out there.
Girlfriend Jerry had on Seinfeld that would call his answering machine and just start talking. Jerry, you know what I think about sometimes.
No, I agree. And what I will say that is weird about that opening scene is the fact that it's all one way. So what you're describing, Gifford, it's also one way, but it's just setting up that this guy he's all bravado.
Yep.
Right. Which again, as a kid, I was like, yeah, I'm all for all bravado. Like, that's great. And then that's the thing is some of the stuff that's later in the movie that's set up to make him kind of a buffoon, I care about at that point because I was just all in on this guy. So I did write a note about, so as he's pulling in, they're playing like poker or whatever. I got to say, and that's so he may not be a great action hero because of how often he loses, but Jack's got great poker game energy.
He does.
Yeah,
he sure does.
And so then they, basically the whole thing sets up. Brad, you'd mentioned why does he care? Why does he have to go along on this? Well, it's because of the nothing to double.
Right.
He
needs his, what was it, $1,400?
Yeah, it's like 1,200 and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's worth a day trip.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. So I do think though so then he tells Wang's got like, I got to get my money. Yeah. And he's like, I'm going to go somewhere first. And he's like, where are you going? Airport. He's like, yeah, over my dead body. They start driving off and he's like, well, I'll drive you, and Wang's like, you don't trust me. So Pete, you had mentioned like, what's their history? It is a little muddy that they're friends, as he says, racial differences withstanding, a couple of Californians. They're obviously guys that get together, but they must have like formed a friendship as adults because Wang tells him his whole story about how he came over, he slept on the floor, before, so that he could bring Miao Yin here and all that. So they're driving, and that's where some of the dialogue where I go, it's funny to me, but I still love it. So the whole time they're driving there, and he's like, "What are we doing?" He's like, "We're picking up a girl." And Jack goes, "A girl from China. All right. I've picked up girls from a lot of other places, but never from China." Like, what the hell does that mean?
He's a trucker. There's a lot of lot lizards out there.
Right. Yeah. Right. I'm like, okay. But then, and then, they're doing all that. They get to the airport, and I love his first interaction with Kim Cattrall. So when he walks over and he's just all like, "Hey, would you ever jump into would you ever jump into the sack with whatever?" And she's like, "Well, I would, but not with a guy in your condition." "Well, let's talk about that. What's wrong with my condition?" "You should stand where I'm standing. It's Miller time." Like it's basically like so Jack, to me, his interactions with Gracie, with Wang, and with Egg, all the dialogue is so fast, and he has just such great chemistry with all three of them. And it's moments when he's going back and forth with all three of those characters now that I absolutely like. Those are the moments in the movie that I love. Whereas when I was a kid, it was a lot of other things.
Sure.
But even in that, so I love that the Lords of Death show up, and I'm like, I wrote the note down. They're more of a sunglasses gang.
Yes. The one guy with the white.
Oh my God, what are those sunglasses? Yes. And when he goes, but here again is one of the moments where he's not a coward. They pull that girl that Kim Cattrall's there for, and he goes right up and he's like, "Let's you and I have a talk, friend,"
Mm-hmm.
And I love that the guy pulls out like a bar and a butterfly knife, and Jack's response is, "Where'd you get that?" And so there's just so many. So they do that. Pete, you mentioned the scene in the parking ramp. That's a very John Carpenter thing where the car is speeding at them and they.
Well, yeah, but then it's like he's just standing there and does not move. And I'm like yelling at him. Is he in shock or what?
Well, so when they're running down and you can see Wang, the back of his jacket and everything. So it's like a steady cam shot where you see them running and then they turn around, the car whips around. It goes right to the last second and then they jump out of the way. And then you see Miao Yin in the back. That to me, that's all very, having watched his other movie, like that's like John Carpenter doing, this is what I think the construction of an action scene is. And when I watch it, it works for me. Like when I see that, I go, yeah, that's freaking cool. And then Jack jumps
like
up
drawn out for how long he was just standing there, like frozen, with his van speeding at him, and he doesn't take a step out of the way.
But then he says, "Son of a bitch must pay," and that's so. Then they're driving. They're driving after them, and one of my favorite things in the movie is Wang and how he always has poor feelings or a poor perception of Gracie. So he goes, they're driving into town and Jack's like, "What the hell just happened?" and all this stuff. And then he goes, "That chick at the airport seemed to know something was up." And his response is, "Don't trust her. She's nuts too. She's a lawyer." and that line just, I don't know. It strikes me as so dumb. But anyway, so yeah, and so we can move through this a little faster, but that's where, then they're chasing them in and they get into that alleyway fight. And Brad, I cannot believe that that the three storms didn't resonate with you.
You didn't wicker hats?
You didn't catch thunder, rain, and lightning?
Yeah.
No.
I caught that. I also like the one guy who they're pulling out their weapons, and the one guy basically pulls out back scratchers for his big weapon.
I always call those chicken.
My luck.
I've never seen those weapons. And I will say this, as a kid, when Rain does that and he's like, "Ha, yeah, and those little claws come out. Yeah. I was like, holy shit. Like thinking like I couldn't imagine somebody confronting me with those.
Going up against something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
But I always call those chicken scratchers.
Yeah.
You know what, Gifford? You don't bring back scratchers to a knife fight.
That's right. I see you played Knifey Spoony before. And
that has to be the first moment
that I liked about that. That was the first scene where I was like, I'm getting why Dave likes this, because there's really fun kung fu like action in that scene. I mean, that was really cool.
I thought that same thing. Like if you're into that kind of thing and those kind of movies, then
it's a throwback to the old like Bruce Lee kind of older
kung fu and by the way, when the Chang Sings and the Wing Kong are facing off, anybody notice who one of the Wing Kong was?
There was a few guys that I recognized. I didn't go back and look what they're from, but yes.
There is a guy named Al Leong who played a prominent role in a movie that was in Brad's Christmas party this year.
Oh, Die Hard.
He's in Die Hard?
Did you catch it?
No.
So one of
was he the guy that ate the Mars bar?
Or? The guy that ate the Mars bar is one of the Wing Kong. He's also the guy that tortures Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
That's what he's from. Yeah, because he's always a bad guy in every movie he's in. He's got that face for it, you know.
Yep. So Al Leong was one of the Wing Kong. But that's the thing is, so that's the moment when the three storms show up. They all do their opening things. They all grab the knives. They have them fly up. They do the flying leap, kill the three guys, pull out their weapons, and then go after them. Like, to me, that's the first moment in this where you go, holy crap, what is this movie? Like, it's because that is the entryway into the whole, this is outside of Egg at the beginning doing the thing with the lightning. This is where you go like, oh, this is not reality.
Right. Like it's a mystical, there's mysticism, there's old world magic,
right.
Yep.
So that to me, like that, I can watch that scene over and over again and just be like, yes, hell yeah. You know. So, but anyway, so then they have that whole thing. They're afterwards, they're at the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Jack's doing great phone acting.
Yep, trying to get his insurance up and running to cover his truck. Yep.
Right. And that's where we meet Eddie and Uncle Chu. Gracie comes in. That's one of Uncle Chu, one of my favorite lines in there is, and what the hell is Gracie Law doing here? when he goes, because Eddie goes, yeah, and anybody that got caught up in this fight was gonna get, be with Lem Lee in the hell of being cut to pieces. What? Chinese got a lot of hells.
Yeah.
And what the hell is Gracie Law doing?
Well, I love that she's a lawyer and her name is Gracie Law.
Gracie Law. Yeah. And I love, so when you guys talk about the bad acting, I get it. Because
that was probably the worst scene because they were throwing some exposition in there with who this other woman is no.
Hold on. Okay. That's after the White Tigers.
Oh, that's okay.
Because they go to the White Tigers, so there again, they find out that Miao Yin is being sold into,
being trafficked. Yep.
Yeah, she's being trafficked. So I love Kurt Russell being Henry Swanson.
Yes. With
Henry
the glasses.
Swanson's my name and action's my game.
Kurt
Russell as a nerd.
Yes.
Yeah, I did like that part. That was funny.
Well, and I love the key is you have to look stupid. He does. Like those lines. And that's so much of the dialogue goes really fast. But even there, when Henry Swanson's doing his thing, Gracie goes over to another car because there's the reporter.
Yeah.
And when she leaves the car, Wang immediately goes to Eddie. What's she doing now? He's so fucking he's so skeptical of her, and it just makes me laugh because she's a lawyer,
right?
But then So again, in the White Tigers, they steal Miao Yin, the storms show up. But that's another one where I love that all these people are running away because they're freaking out. These three guys dropped out from the sky. One of them is shooting lightning out of his hands. Jack just goes right up to one of them, pulls his hat up, punches him twice in the face. The guy just looks at him, and I love Jack's little. He kind of nods like, "All right," you know, and the guy just kicks him into the next room. And that, I mean, like back when I was a kid, I probably was like, "Oh, you know, whatever." I love the fact that he constantly loses, you know, like, but he's all
bravado, like you said.
He runs right up there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's all cock and balls.
And so, yeah. And then, so that is where, so Gifford, that is where then they go back and she plops him down in her chair. And he's like, "Where the hell are we?" He's like, "That was not real. Where the hell are we?" "My office." "What, do you sleep in your office?" Yeah. But that's where all the exposition happens. So what did you think of that?
It was, the acting was awful. The writing was awful. They were just trying to cram so much information so we could keep up with the juggernaut that is this movie into a very short scene. And God.
Anybody catch what anybody? So that's what I think is funny when you listen to it. They're talking about Lo Pan. Did you catch his name?
Oh God, yeah, because she's been looking for this guy for years, and
Mr. David Lo Pan.
Yeah,
David. He's a 2,000-year-old Chinese demon, right? And his name is David.
Right. Seems about right.
I think you know, now I'm questioning you, Dave.
Right, Mr. David Lo Pan.
You might be a 2,000-year-old Asian guy.
Yes.
Right?
So some of the exposition there is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're and so we'll fly along here. But I'm sorry. That is one other thing I want to. But like when they're in the little scene where Egg and Uncle Chu are talking about who Lo Pan is. There's one moment where. And this is as Jack and Wang are going into the Wing Kong exchange, right? Okay. So they go in, they're holding a phone. Yep. They're holding a phone. So of course they're going to get through security.
They're official.
And they get through security and they're going down. And at one point, as they're kind of getting trapped, it's cutting back and forth. And Egg is kind of talking with Uncle Chu about, you know, what Lo Pan is and everything. And at one point, Gracie comes up to Eddie, punches him in the shoulder, and he gives the biggest, "How?" Like, he's so hurt by it. I don't know. It's things like that make this my favorite movie.
Well, and it's things like that you pick up and show that you've seen it 350 times.
Well, right. And I have no idea where you are. But my favorite part was a dumb part like that, where he's telling everybody the plan of what they're going to do. And then he opens the door. All the bad guys are right there in front of him. And then he shuts the door and says,
"We may be trapped."
Yes.
That was the highlight of the movie to me.
So we can speed through a little bit of that. So Gracie and Margot get there with Eddie. They get trapped. So they're in that like holding cell with all the women that they must be trafficking or whatever.
Yep.
So Eddie and Wang, they're basically causing a distraction so Jack can sneak in,
fighting a bunch of women.
They fight a bunch of women, and okay, again. So first of all, I will say I listen to the score of this movie all the time, and John Carpenter always scores his movies. I think the music in this movie is freaking awesome, like the whole time. And it is. It's just so. It's so cool. And so as they're walking up and those women come out, she's got that pole.
Yep.
They hit them, and then all of a sudden she goes like this, and a bunch of like smoke shoots out.
Yep.
Much like the Chinese back scratchers. I'm like, oh my God, what are we watching here?
Well, and what I like about this scene is the two guys are taking on these women who have, you know, their weapons, and they're giving it to them. Like, I mean, they're really going at these guys, and the guys are doing everything they can to defend themselves. And then it's one punch. They get one punch in and the girls go down.
Yes.
The
Well,
other,
and I will say, so this movie definitely suffers from magic bullet phenomenon.
Mhm.
So like even when the Pork Chop Express is in that tiny little alleyway,
Yep.
which we can make all kinds of jokes about that. But
Yep.
when the Pork Chop Express is in that tiny little alleyway and they're all having that big shootout, the truck doesn't get hit.
Right.
Just like when they get into Egg's bus as they're driving away on the first escape, no one, like the whole bus gets shot up, but no one dies.
No, yeah.
Well,
There's no bullet goes through the side of the bus.
right.
Well, and also this is the scene I think where Jack has that gun and he caps a guy, and another guy goes, "Is that the first time you killed somebody?" He's like,
of course not.
Of course not. Like I've killed people all the time. Like,
Well, and that's so think about that. That is a maitre d' and a restaurant owner
right.
that are the people with him. He kills a bunch of guys with a machine gun. That's the first time he ever capped somebody?
Right.
Of course not.
Well, and then also the other part I love is when he rescues Gracie. She's tied up in her cell. And
yes.
he comes in and rescues her. She's got a gag. And as they're running through this place trying to get out, the gag's still on her. He didn't cut the gag off. She didn't take the gag off. She's just running around still gagged. And I'm like, you know what? That's probably not for the, it might be for the best to keep the gag on her.
Right. So with all that stuff, so that's where you learn about the whole green-eyed girl and that he's got to become human. So now you know why they're there. So Brad, when you're talking about that is one of my moments where I go, that's what I love about this movie now. So Kurt Russell runs up to that door and he gives all this, from here on out, it's all easy. Officer Storm's a nice false front. And he's given like this whole long-winded thing of like, you just follow the leader. And he opens the door and you hear that little, the musical cue. And there's a bunch of Wing Kong there. And he's like, we may be trapped. But then he's like, hide, because he's telling them, hide. They only saw me.
Right.
And so I just think that's cool. And then that's the first moment where you see that Wang is probably, like he kills a bunch of them with his machine gun, but then he throws his knife aside and he goes off and hides to get his knife. And Wang just kicks the crap out of all these guys.
Right.
And that's the first moment where you think like, oh, Wang is probably the hero of this movie, because you realize he's a lot more capable. So, there's two other big things to get to on the way, but at this point, like, what are you guys thinking?
It's craziness. I don't really understand where. I mean, I know where it's going, but it's a lot of. It's a lot of nuts. It's crazy fights and lines, and they're trying to force this relationship between Jack and Gracie. When they're swimming, and they're escaping, and the whole kiss thing, and it's kind of it's nutty.
The one line that stood out to me, I don't think you guys mentioned it yet, but where they're like running through this building and whatever. They find these tracks that are on the ground. Kurt Russell immediately looks at it and he goes, well, what you got here is two people dragging a third.
Right.
Because he's been in that situation.
All right, Sherlock.
He knows what that looks like on the ground. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if I'm going to understand it at the end and get all my questions answered.
Well, and the other thing I want to see the building plan for this place. Because they're going up, they're going down.
It's all magic, though.
It's magic.
All these hidden.
It's a fantasy.
That part, I even get that.
Because holy cow, that's an impressive building that they're trying to run through. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one where I go, it's weird in that there is a real fascination with the whole up or down. Like anytime they get into something. So at the one point when they get into that Buddha elevator, he goes, oh, is it, let me guess, it's an elevator that only goes down. And Wang's like, yeah. And he's like, all right. But the whole thing with that is they're trying too hard to like let you know that all this is happening underneath Chinatown.
Right.
And that's and you know, that is the only other part. So when they're doing the thing where the storms are like seeing if the green-eyed girls will work, that's the whole time where Egg is walking them through all those tunnels.
Yep.
And it is to me, that's the one point where personally I like all that stuff still, but that is a slower, in what I view to be a very fast-paced movie. I feel like that is the one place where it really slows down, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But so let's go to when, so they get back together with Egg. By the way, Egg's house, where he goes, this place is a dump, Wang. That place is the Ghostbusters headquarters.
I was wondering if it was the Ghostbusters.
Yes.
Place. Yeah, the fire station.
Yeah, and so they have the little, I love that he's got a little fire pole that goes down into the underworld.
Just one level though. It's like just 8 feet down. You know, we're just gonna drop down.
But here again, and this is where I kind of go like, again, it's where I love how the movie has aged, and it's not it's like, it's not making fun of the fact that like this is all Chinese people in the cast and everything else. So right before they go to Egg's place, Egg and the Chang Sing show up at Wang's restaurant, and Jack's first line is, "Any of these guys savvy English?" And the first guy's like, "Hey man, who is this guy?" Right. Like,
yeah, none of these actors have. There's no accent. They've lived here forever. There's no reason why there would be any accent. So it's, you know, true to form for people who live in San Francisco. You know.
Right. So anyway, so then they get to they walk through the underground. They get up for the fight, and again, to me, the fact that they did this because Kurt Russell was like a big guy who couldn't do a lot of the martial arts. They start the fight by him shooting the ceiling and knocking himself out.
Yes.
Which again, as a kid, I thought that was, and when I watched this with my girls, that by far was the funniest scene to them. They thought that was hilarious. And then he wakes up, immediately goes over to shoot Lo Pan. Thunder punches his gun to bits.
Breaks it, shatters it. Yep.
And then he falls back, and that guy falls on him while he stabs him in his, you know, he's got his knife in his boot.
Yep.
So
and then he can't get out from underneath him. He's stuck there for like so long during the fight.
The entire climactic fight, he's either been unconscious or trapped under a soldier.
Right.
And that's the thing, is it's like, that's super funny, you know.
Did anybody else love the marital chapel has an escalator and it looks like a mall food court?
Yes. And it's got the little neon striping.
Yeah.
And everything.
Neon striping all the way around, like, you know, up a level. And
it is, I've heard it described as the most 80s location ever.
Well,
magic. It's part of the magic.
Maybe since the third season of Stranger Things in the mall.
Right. It is totally Starcourt Mall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so from all that, and when I talk about like the chemistry between people, so to me, what I love about the back end of the movie, when Egg is like, you know, giving all this wisdom, when they take the little potion, and he's like, so I did write a little bit of this down. So hold on, I gotta,
because they started with a simple cheers,
right,
and then they continued on.
Well, so right before they get there, he's like, "What's in the flask, Egg? Magic potion? Yeah, good, thought so. What do we do? Drink it? Yeah, good, thought so." You know, and then they get into that room. They find the elevator. Wang's hitting it, and he looks at Jack, and Jack goes, "Hollow, fuck it," and he just cuts it open, and that's where they find the thing. But then he goes, "What is this stuff exactly?" You know, and he's like, "You can see things no one else can see, do things no one else can do," and he's like, "Real things, as real as Lo Pan." Oh well, what more could a guy ask for, right? A 6 demon bag. Great. Sensational. A 6 demon bag. What's in it? What's in it, Egg? Wind, fire, all that type of thing. And then that's where so they take that thing, and I love as they're riding the elevator down, they're all like buzzed off of this potion that they've just taken. And he's like, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling really positive about this right now. And they're all giving him that sign.
Yeah.
Is it getting hot in here? Or like, I just like every time I watch this, I just go, fuck, this is so good.
I will say, Dave, as we're having this discussion, I am falling more in love with this movie.
Just
based off
harshest selling to start with too.
Enthusiasm for it. It is wonderful. Yeah.
So then, they have the big fight. There's all kinds of crazy shit that happens there. They go back up, and that's where Jack is talking with Gracie. They kiss. He comes out with the lipstick on his lips, which, is kind of funny. But then, he comes out, and there again, he is all bravado, facing off with Lopan, and so Manzukis in the blank check one goes, it's crazy that in one of the final scenes, he says his name and a character goes, who? He's like, Jack Burton, me. As he's facing off a Lopan. And it's one of those things it's like, Jesus Christ, he's supposedly the hero of this story. But he kills Lopan.
Who saw that coming? Did the other two of you see that move coming? Brad,
that he was going to do that?
I didn't
I had
see it.
totally forgotten about from the beginning of the movie when
it's all in the reflexes.
Had those reactions.
Set up all in the reflexes. Yeah.
Yes, man, that blew me away.
With the machete in the bottle, and so that whole thing happens. If you really look at it, it's another one where Lopan's throw is so bad. Like Jack catches it over here. He would have missed Lopan about as bad as Jack missed him.
Yeah.
Or he would have missed Jack.
Yeah.
But yeah, he kills him. And this is the moment. So this is the moment that as a kid totally hooked me.
Oh yeah.
Was when Thunder sees him and he freaks out and he self-implodes.
Yeah.
Blows himself up.
I don't think he's gonna stop.
I don't think he's gonna stop.
It's like something from Willy Wonka.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like Violet Beauregard becoming a big blueberry.
Right.
I did, I remember as a kid thinking to myself, oh my God, this is the greatest movie I've ever seen. Because this guy just blew up.
And right
I thought
before
it was the
that,
funniest thing ever.
Right before that, Wang's taking him on, and you just see the view that Jack sees through the doorway, and Wang's running one way, and then a second later, here comes Thunder freaking chopping at him.
He chops that little dog in half. And,
for no reason. He stops to whack the thing. It's oh my God, what the hell is going on here? Well, the other thing I like about this is that Lopan, who's been searching, for how many thousand years for the green-eyed girl?
2,000 years.
He decides to marry them both.
Yes.
Because he has to kill one.
Yes.
And then he'll have the other one. But all I kept thinking was, this guy's been through hell for 2,000 years, and now he's decided to marry two women. Hasn't he been through enough at this point?
Well, no. I mean, you
take two wives. I mean, holy crap! He's just a glutton for punishment.
He's just going to be henpecked into eternity.
Oh God, it's unreal.
All right.
So, are we making it out now? We got the big kill scene with Lopan.
Well, I got one last thing.
Okay, I got one too.
When they're saying goodbye, I love the fact that, geez, Jack, aren't you going to kiss her goodbye? Nope. And he just walks out, and then his goodbye.
Okay, that part's the one I didn't see coming.
Well, and his goodbye with Wang, again, you may call it over dramatic, melody, whatever. We really shook the pillars of heaven, didn't we, Wang? Mm-hmm. And he's like, no horseshit, Jack. And they, but so to me, this is the equivalent of the opening scene in Predator where Carl Weathers and Schwarzenegger like slap hands and you see the bulging biceps.
Yep.
Like I just look at I listen to this scene and I'm like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever.
They're
like
the
I
biggest
love
badasses.
I love how like melodramatic and whatever it is, and it does. Like there are moments. So the opening moment with the Pork Chop Express and this one for sure. But even when they're doing the six demon bag thing, and then all of a sudden Wang gets like weirdly patriotic.
Yeah, that was
all of that stuff. If I would have seen it first time as an adult, I'd probably go like, "Oh, brother." It gives me freaking goosebumps every time. Every time.
Well, and the line with "Aren't you gonna kiss her goodbye?" and he just goes, "Nope." To me, is a throwback to Empire Strikes Back when Princess Leia says to Han right before he goes in the bath at the end for and she goes, "I love you," and his response is, "I know."
I know. Yeah.
Like total badass move.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, and so that is one thing just to kind of close the loop on like alternate casting. So Jack Burton or Kurt Russell was originally considered for Han Solo. And he was one of the guys that, I mean, like people always talk about how Tom Selleck was maybe going to be Indiana Jones, but Kurt Russell was on like the short list of people that would have been Kurt Russell. And
wow.
So in this movie, Carpenter originally wanted Eastwood. The other name that was attached, which totally wouldn't have worked in my opinion either, was Nicholson. And then the studio,
that's worse.
Yeah,
right. Well, actually, I think Nicholson of the two would have been better because he could have pulled off some of the comedy things, but in a very different way.
Yeah.
So actually two. So with Gracie Law, the studio wanted them to hire they quote unquote a rock star. So a lot of people speculate that it would have either been Madonna or Cyndi Lauper. And then
Cyndi Lauper.
Well, because they wanted they again the only thing
Cyndi Lauper
is Cyndi Lauper, if you like just one of the guys. So but then the other one is the guy that was originally going to be Wang was Jackie Chan. And John Carpenter didn't want Jackie Chan. Yeah, because and Carpenter didn't want Jackie Chan because he didn't feel like his English was clean enough.
Oh, sure.
And I'm really glad that they like it's one of those things where I just go and I think there was an issue with Jackie Chan. Like I don't know if Jackie Chan wanted it either, but it was like all these things didn't work out, and they didn't work out in a way where I'm like, for me, I'm so glad that it didn't work out in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I think of any of those other things and I just go, oh, it totally wouldn't have worked then.
I'd agree with that. I mean, Jackie Chan would have been great for the action scenes, but yeah, the voice wouldn't have been right. And right. Not only that, but that's the nice thing, like as you talked about, Wang turns out to be, the main hero of this whole story. And back in '86, I probably wouldn't have known who Jackie Chan was, so really he kind of would have been an unknown in that regard.
Well, and that's the thing.
To me.
He was not well known at that point. But that's the thing. I like that Wang, for fans of the podcast, I like that Wang's a little bit of a sneaky favorite.
There you go. Very well done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very well. Yeah. So anyway, that's the movie. Is there? Yes, I'm a sucker for a Wang.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh. Well, hey, Dave, I am glad that this was your pick. I got to see something that I have not seen before, which is always a lot of fun. And it's fun to I watched it 2 days ago. On my own. Courtney came in every once in a while to see what I was watching. But it's fun to hear it through the prism of a real fan, and I think that helps me gain an appreciation for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I said I'd probably never watch it again, but after just listening to all this, I almost feel like I'm going to have to someday.
Yeah.
I'll have to.
I don't know.
I'll listen to the podcast and then
If
I'll
you ever
watch it right away.
Brad, if you ever have a hankering for it, just call me up.
Well, that's true.
I'll be there.
That would
I'm your
actually be more
Huckleberry.
fun than watching it by myself. Okay.
Yeah. Having the real fan in the room for sure.
Are you
All
gonna
right,
be
should we get
staring
to
at
the
me
top
whole
five?
time watching my expression?
Let's
I will be.
let's get
Brad,
to the
what'd you
top
think of
five.
that? All right, so I'll jump in. Do you guys want me to give my list first?
Usually you go last.
Yeah, you should probably go last.
You go last.
Okay. So that's fine. So the list was top 5 things that you are hesitant to recommend to other people.
Sure.
And I can go first. I don't know. I didn't know which direction to go with this. I went in a couple of different ways. I think you'll maybe figure out why. But the first one that I had, actually, I'm going 5-1 here. I'm going with Birdemic. It's one of those, and Dave got me into it. But it's one of those movies that's so bad it's good. And the next one was from when I was a kid. I used to watch it. I probably watched it 57 times. I loved it. I don't know if I haven't seen it in a long time. Maybe I'll have to go back and rewatch it, or maybe we'll do it for the show. Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I loved it. I thought it was funny.
I think that is one
did
that's
its role.
Yeah, it's pretty loved by a lot of folks. Yeah,
I'd be hesitant to recommend it to people.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
Especially if they were going to watch it for the first time now. I've watched it with my kids, and it's one of those where I go like, look, the magic's still there because I loved it as a kid, but
right.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah,
I think a lot of it depends on when you saw it the first time.
Yep.
You know,
for sure. But it still works for kids, by the way. Both of my kids like that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah, mine. We watched it, and we all liked it.
Yeah.
The next one, I'm not sure how many people still like this. And again, it's a movie that was right up there, one of my favorites when I was probably about that same age. Perfect Strangers.
Oh,
I mean the TV show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Some
people think it's dumb and stupid. But
I haven't seen it since, so I'd have to probably go back and watch it. But that's probably a pretty good pick, Pete.
Right. My number 2 was my dad's favorite movie of all time, actually. And I loved it, but I would never recommend it to anybody today in today's world. Dallas? If I did, no, Blazing Saddles.
Blazing Saddles. Yeah.
Oh man, I would recommend that to anybody because you know why? People got to.
You have to
F out, and it's funny as
but
that.
you can see why it's on my list, though. You cannot recommend it to anybody now.
I've heard Pete say that before, and I totally get that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
And my number 1, no surprise here, Dave, you're going to love this, The Room. You have to know somebody, and you have to know them well before you're going to say, hey, you should go check out this movie.
I've never seen it. Still not seen it.
Pete, I have to say one of my favorite things when we talked about that movie was you brought up a guy that was like, yeah, that was okay. And it's like, no, dumbass. You can't you either love it or you don't get it at all. Yeah. It's not
it's a terrible movie if you don't get the humor.
like
either the funniest movie of all time or the worst movie of all time.
Right.
It's okay.
There's no in between, dumbass.
Look, I got into the story a little.
Right.
I'm gonna go next.
They were just losing me a little bit with some of the acting choices, but
yes, he is.
That was his number 1. All right.
I'm going to go next because you might think I would have that as well, but I don't have that because I would never recommend that to anybody to watch. I mean, unless it was
to me.
Well, a close friend and we were going to watch it together, that's different. But like, I'm not going to go around and tell people, hey, yeah, you should go watch that movie. I mean, unless you know that they are into those kind of just dumb movies, then no way.
You have to set them up and really explain what they're getting themselves into.
All right, so here's what I
like. Oh, you got to go watch this.
Here's what I got. So for number 5, I have this podcast. I want people to listen to it, and I want people to love it.
Yep.
But it's a risk anytime I bring it up and say I do this and ask people, you don't know what people are going to do. So
yep. That's
especially like coworkers, you got.
I'm proud of what we
it's
do.
Not always HR friendly.
I'm proud of what we do. I have fun. We're hitting 100 episodes next week, but it's still weird. For number 4, I just listed music. I couldn't pick out anything because like every time I try to like give somebody to listen to a band I love or something, they're never going to love it the way you do. They're never
Right.
going to hear it the way you do. I couldn't pick one because it's just pretty much everything. Everybody has their own taste in music, and it's really hard to like recommend it to somebody unless you already know that they are into it.
That's true.
Yep.
Loving that wet leg, Brad.
Yeah, well, but see that I was weird. I didn't know if I should even bring it up, but you did like that.
I'm gonna reference something like that. Yeah.
For number 3, I have a TV show that I think Dave and Gifford have both watched. It's The In-Betweeners.
So good.
And I think this is one of the funniest shows that has ever existed. And it's the British humor, and it's dirty, and it's raunchy, and it's just insane.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why it's hard to suggest it to people.
You just don't know. Right. That's
Right.
fair.
And
I enjoyed it.
People I know kind of will like that kind of thing, but you just never know. And that one is just so far out there that it's like I don't know.
Yep.
Number 2, I have, this is really out of the box here, but I just said, so you guys might know I'm a big fan of the Gophers, football and basketball, and I have a really hard time telling people that anymore. But like even just going tailgating, it's like somebody comes with me to a football game or tailgating, they might not like it like I do. They might look at us like, what are you guys doing here? This is dumb. And it's just, I don't know. So
I think that every time.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
That's because you have a blue shirt on.
I love
But it's a big part of my life and my friends, and we have a great time, but it's like, I don't know who else wants to come. And then at number 1, this ties into Dave. So Dave's favorite movie of all time is Big Trouble in Little China. And I actually listed 2 here. One of them is Walk Hard, which we're going to talk about this year.
Yes, we are.
And I just can't see how anybody could watch a movie and not laugh their ass off. But I know some people don't. But my all-time favorite movie is LA Story with Steve Martin. And it's so weird because it's like an unknown movie to a lot of people. Even people that love Steve Martin, that I know well, that love him and love all his movies. Like Gifford, you had never seen it when we
never
talked
seen
about
it. Yeah.
It just like flew under the radar and people just missed it. And it's like, my God, this movie spoke to me on a level unlike hardly any other movie has. And I want everybody to love it, but I just know they're not going to, and it's hard to suggest it.
That's a weird pick. I wouldn't have seen you picking that for this category because
it's because
nobody
loves it.
I would happily recommend it to anybody.
Well, and I will say this, Brad. I've taken a lot of your suggestions and enjoyed a lot of them. In-Betweeners, I watched the series, I watched the movies, The Commitments. I watched that. That was fun.
And you are somebody that I can pretty much say anything to, and that's what's great. But
that's what's
so I will go next. Brad, thank you for bringing up the podcast because that was high on my list.
Oh, good.
So I moved some one thing in here. I moved a couple things up. So I'm not going to have that on my list. My number 5 is the movie Idle Hands.
You have talked about that before.
And Brad, honestly, I think based on your recent viewing of movies, I think you would like it. It's a dumb, funny black comedy kind of horror fun movie. It's Seth Green is in it. It's fun. I don't know. I like it, but it's not a great movie. My number 4.
I'm going to add it to my list.
It's the kid from Final Destination.
Yes,
right?
He's the main actor. Jessica Alba, I believe it might be her first major movie that she was in. So not hard on the eyes there. So that might be another reason I enjoy it. My number 4 is Johnny Be Good.
Really? I've never seen that either.
Hall.
Michael, yes, and along with Robert Downey Jr. and Uma Thurman. It's such a dumb movie. There's a lot of just crass humor in it, but that was a movie where I watched it and I realized that if you're an actor, you can be anything. Michael Anthony Hall, as I was growing up, was every nerd in any movie that I watched. And then he came out with Johnny Be Good, and he is the biggest stud high school football player in the nation.
He's like the top quarterback recruit, right? Or something like that.
And nobody else bought it because his career just went after that.
Man, but again, not a great movie, but there's a lot of funny stuff in there. We got the principal from Breakfast Club as his high school coach, Jennifer Tilly.
That too?
Yeah, there's some fun stuff in there. Not a great movie, but I love it. I hesitate to recommend. My number 3, Tom Cruise in Cocktail.
Oh boy.
I watched it again not too long ago.
Law.
I still enjoy it. Not a great show, but it's fun. I like flipping the bottles around and the bar poet stuff. So yeah. My number 2, a television show that I've talked about a few times on this podcast, Letterkenny. Canadian-based, hockey-based, small-town-based humor. I enjoy it. I've recommended to a few people. I've watched some stuff with friends Gary and Meg, and I don't know how much they really enjoyed it, but I love it. Another great thing. But my number 1, and it is by far and away number 1 on my list, and that is being a parent to a hockey player. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of money. But I love the people, the other parents, and traveling to all these little towns and seeing their rinks and watching my kid play. The
lifestyle. You're saying the lifestyle.
The lifestyle. I enjoy broadcasting the games, calling the games for the kids, doing interviews with the players and playing those back. I absolutely love it, but it's hard for me to recommend that anybody else get into it because it's a lot. So that is my number 1.
All right.
Go ahead, Dave.
Take it away, Dave.
Bring us home. When I explain this, and that's so I'm gonna frame something up actually, and I have something very similar to you, Brad, on this. So the way when I was thinking about this, the idea was when you see something and you love it so much that you know when you bring it up to other people, you're just going to be let down.
Right.
Kind of thing. Right.
That's what I was going with.
Here's the thing. And like this, to me, this is a movie. I kind of view it like The Room in that you can't have just a opinion. It's either this movie was really stupid or this movie was freaking awesome. Like there's no in between because they're going for it, and so one example I'll give, one of my favorite movies I've seen in the last handful of years, but I loved it in a very specific way where it could have been that way. But actually, Brad, you were the one person I thought I'll recommend it to you, and I bet you'll get it similar to me, which was Sing Street.
Oh yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, and it's this weird movie. A lot of people don't know it, but it was a movie. I watched it and I was like, oh my God, I love this movie so much. And there's not a lot of people I would have told about it, but I thought Brad would like it. And so when you said that one night, you're like, we're watching it and it's great, whatever. So that's the difference. So one was, Sonia asked me to watch this movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. And it's up for Best Picture this year. So people have seen it. Well, and I know, so that's the thing, Brad. I know you didn't like it. I loved it, and it's very related to my number 4. I loved it in a way. There were just things. So first of all, the movie is visually bonkers. But there were things. It's more about. So it's about this lady who's running this like failing dry cleaner. She's under, she's upside down on her taxes. her husband wants to is like they're basically, and she's alienated from her daughter. She's Asian. She's alienated from her daughter because she can't accept her daughter's identity. Her daughter is gay. And as I'm watching it, there were two moments specifically. So eventually there's all this like interdimensional, they've lived all these different lives in different universes, and it gets really weird. But there's a moment where in an alternate reality, the husband and her are very successful. They're like these famous movie stars, and they kind of fall in love, but then they don't. And at one point when they don't, the husband says to her, and I wrote this down actually, it was so he just basically says to her, even though you've broken my heart yet again, I wanted to say in another life, I would have really liked just doing laundry and taxes with you. And it was what it hits at is like the idea that like he just didn't like he wanted that life more than anything, right? And I don't know, there's something about, I think it's really easy to like look at other people and go like, oh, they have it bad. And so when I was watching it, it just hit me in a certain way. The only so I do have an honorable mention in that regard, and that is the Matrix Resurrections, the one that just came out in the last couple of years.
I watched that.
It's a weird movie, but there again, post COVID, like there were certain things like in COVID that they hit on in that movie that like just hit me specifically. So
if you go back to Everything Everywhere All at Once for just a second, that's like a whole nother category for me. It's like a movie that I couldn't stand, but I feel like I'm not allowed to say that because it's up for best picture, and there's so many people that claim it's the greatest thing that has come out in like decades, and I totally missed it, so I'm stupid because I didn't like it, and I think it's just too much.
Something that the world is reluctant to recommend to you, Brad.
If Dave can stand up and say that I love Big Trouble in Little China, Brad can stand up and say that he does not like everything. What is it?
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah. So it's fine. It's what you like.
Brad, here's the thing. When I watched it, and that kind of goes into my number 4. To me, when I watched it, it was such a. I think a lot of people really like that movie because it's so visually over the top. But for me, It had nothing to do with all the gonzo visual effects and everything. And so the whole time I was watching it, I kept thinking like, I don't know if a lot of people would like this movie because it's so weird.
No, I don't think a lot of people would. I think, there's a lot of people that do, and obviously it's up for awards. So it was a good, it's obviously a well-made movie and everything, but I don't think the audience is very wide actually.
It's so crazy. Well, and so there's a moment there where they're also in an alternate reality. And so the whole scene where the mom and the daughter end up in a different world where they're both rocks. So they're stuck next to each other.
Oh God. Yeah. That was like, oh my God.
Yeah, and I love that. Because here's the thing is that at that point they're stuck together. They can't move. And the mom is basically saying like, I'm okay with this because as much as we fight, I want to be with you. And it's that whole thing of like, she's kind of coming around to the fact that like she's got to accept her daughter for who she is, which, and again, with, just with like, I think about like my sister and stuff like that. And I think stuff like that is very important, that like you should be okay to be who you are. So in both cases, when I was watching the movie, it just kind of really hit me.
Can I boil this down to one thing why Brad didn't like it? The movie is 2 hours and 19 minutes long. So when he started
why can't it end?
It wasn't over fast enough. So that might be part of the reason.
Because they put everything into it.
They did, all at once. Yeah.
All at once.
Well, then it should have been over really short.
So my next one is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and I've only seen this one once, but I loved how different and weird this movie was. Yeah, I don't know why I've never really gone back to watch it.
That's surprising.
But I have very distinct memory. Well, and so yeah, the plot is Jim Carrey is flushing an ex-girlfriend out of his mind because it hurts too bad. He hired this service, and they're going to erase his memories. And there's a moment in that movie when the memories are really starting to slide out fast, and he has this like so he's all the pain is like going out of him, but at one point it's like right after they've fought and he's like sitting in the back of a car listening to her talk to someone else, and this smile goes on his face. And it's kind of related back to that first one, you know, the first one I said. It's just that idea of like, you have to take the good with the bad, right? Now he's in love with her because they, you know, he's realizing what he. So anyway, it's just one of those things. Like when I watched the movie, I thought this movie's just hitting me in a way that's very personal, and like it's such a weird movie. I don't know if I'd recommend it to anyone. So the honorable mention I have on this one is 2 movies, which is Vanilla Sky and Magnolia. Both movies I've only seen once. They're weird movies.
Yep.
All 3 of them, when I saw them, I kept thinking like, I love this movie so much.
Yep, I did too.
My next one, this is very much like Brad, you with music. For me, it's stand-up comedians.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one for you.
Great category.
I will hear certain bits where I go, oh my God, I freaking love this. And it is always depressing to share them with someone else and hear and see them go, that is funny. Yeah. Like, it's like, no, it's not just funny. It's mind-breakingly like, my God, how did they connect this?
Right. And I cried myself, you know, like almost tired from laughing at this.
I almost went insane the first time I listened to this, right? So it is that whole thing of it. I feel like, and there's been times I've shared things where people get into it or whatever, but it just isn't in the same way. And I think books, music, and movies are all very personal. And movies goes a little more because so much of the gaps are being filled in for you. But I think those 3, like, you experience them in a way where your mind is connecting so much that it's ultimately always disappointing to recommend it elsewhere and then be let down.
Right. Well, and when I brought this topic up to Courtney the other night when I had to put together my top 5, the first thing that she brought up was Ali Wong, stand-up comedian. She's like, I love her. She's so dirty. She's like, I'm hesitant to suggest her to other people because of how messed up it is.
Right. We all have HPV, GIF. We all
do we know? Shoot, I vaccinated my children against that. That's surprising.
So my last 2 are, so it's this movie is number 1. Number 2 is another movie that's very closely related, which is The Last Dragon. Those are 2 of, and I may mention these later on in one of our other episodes. Both of these movies, Last Dragon came out in 1985. It's this like, this one's a little more tackier and it's a more of an acquired taste. But both movies are movies I absolutely fell in love with. I feel like I can still watch them and they aged well for me. But I know that if I told anyone else to watch them, and especially now, if you were going to watch either movie for the first time now, they would come off as corny or whatever. Sure. So that's my list.
It's a very good list. The Last Dragon, you know that it's an excellent movie when the top billed cast, the first 2 actors, only go by a first name. So if you look that up on IMDb, the first guy is
Timac and Vanity.
Yes. So they don't need last names. That's how good they are. Yeah, it's like Prince and Cher made a movie. Yeah.
Hey, Gifford.
Yeah.
You know who I have no trouble recommending to other people?
I was wondering my guess is Preacher Row.
All right. Love him. Here we go.
I'd like to thank Dave for coming on to kick off our new month. I think this is an excellent topic to start it with. And
next week is going to be just dope.
Next week.
Oh my God.
Well, thanks for indulging me, guys. I appreciate it.
Well, I talked forever on the LA Story one. It was my favorite movie. You had this one. We all had our favorite movie, and you've got to like get the whole thing out there. It is an indulgence.
And next week it may be a 3-hour episode because this movie This movie is high on all of our.
You know, I had actually had the thoughts that we should like watch it together and just record us watching it, and that could be the podcast.
Oh my God, it would be so good. That would take us 3 hours as well to watch it.
Well, it'd be an hour and a half, but.
Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week for episode 100. Yes.
All right. Bye.
No one's here to comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your son is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. And start to me on my back. I turn it up to you. I'm scared but there's nothing I can do.